Welcome to By All Means Necessary Real Recovery Talk. I'm Marco Murillo, and I'm a grateful recovering addict. This is episode 3 with my wife, Debbie, my best friend, an integral part of why I actually was able to get clean. And this is episode 1 of a 2-part episode. We both felt that it's important to hear the other side of the story, the spouse, the children, the parents. So what we wanted to do is have Debbie share her story about how when we first met all the way to when I went into rehab. So, hey Deb, how are you?
Hi, hello everyone. So our story is pretty interesting. I met Marco actually when I was in culinary school. He was already a sous chef for a pretty celebrity chef. And he actually was only supposed to spend a couple months in New York. And at the time I was volunteering a lot for events, that the culinary school we were able to volunteer for certain things. And I ended up meeting him one day at an exhibition, food demo. And it was not the greatest meeting. He basically ran over my foot with a cooler. And at the time I had a boyfriend and I was very irritated with him. And then at the end of the night, he came up to me and we were just talking. And I found him so fascinating because he was very different than the boyfriend I had at the time. And, he was in his chef coat and, he was basically everything that I was sort of aspiring to be myself. So that was the initial attraction. And we would just keep seeing each other at these events. And, that's basically how it came to be. And then we just started, living what I like to call a very 90s New York life. Working in kitchens and getting out late and going to dinner at 3, 4 in the morning and, dining beside famous celebrity chefs every night and sort of living the high life. Obviously, I was doing it clean. And at the time, I didn't know he was doing drugs. I had no clue. I knew a little bit about, a little bit of smoking weed here and there. Obviously, I saw the drinking, which was quite significant at the time when we first met. But I didn't really think anything of it. And I didn't come from a family that basically had any addiction problems or, I come from a family where there's not even a divorce. There's no divorce. There's no drugs that people openly spoke about. We had a lot of pressure as kids to overachieve. I didn't really have that type of childhood that I was really exposed to any of that stuff. So it wasn't even on my radar. Even the amount of drinking didn't even worry me. I just thought it was, okay, that's what you do when you're in your mid-20s, and that's it.
And this is when I had the loft in Brooklyn.
Yeah, we were throwing parties. And
all my friends were chefs.
Right. Everybody was coming over, bringing drinks and joints. And, I didn't really think anything of it. I just thought it was, again, just the lifestyle of A, being a chef, and B, just being young.
You're 19 to 20.
Yeah, I'm 19 at that time.
Okay.
And that was it. And when I think back now, I'm like, oh my gosh, when you look back in hindsight, I'm like, there's a million signs. but I didn't see them at the time, and I had no clue. Then fast forward, we opened our own restaurant. I think that's when I felt his behavior got worse. But again, I thought it was, perhaps touches of mental illness, or that he was perhaps bipolar or had like some sort of mood disorder, or, you have to also remember when I met him, he was in active addiction. So to me, it was just varying degrees of psychosis or varying degrees of, whatever I thought it was. And that was really how I just continued to live. Was I wasn't even making excuses for it because I didn't know what it was. I didn't know. It was not a part of my world.
And this is like when people were asking you, was this at that point where people were questioning like my behavior and asking you things of that nature, like what is that, or do you notice this, or was that at that time?
Yeah, definitely.
And that was like family and friends were asking you that?
Yeah, and I would always defend and say, oh, it's because of this, because of stress. Every excuse in the book, because I really believed it was. So it really wasn't lying. I was probably in denial, but I excused everything, all the behaviors, stuff like that. And then it just got really bad. I remember, I guess, when he was in the height of his addiction, when we still lived in New York, I remember just him being in the bathroom for hours. And at the time, we lived in like a 3-bedroom apartment with 1 bathroom. And it was always a struggle, like if you needed to go to the bathroom, because he was always in there for hours. And then just sort of weird behaviors. Like you'd look under the door to see like what the hell he was doing. And he was like putting a towel to block that literal 1/2-inch space at the bottom of the door. And being there for, I'm talking like 4 hours at a time. And, the kids are banging on the door. They have to go to the bathroom. I'm saying, what the hell are you doing in there? Still, none of it is really adding up. And I would just see, one time I woke up, there was a pot from the kitchen in the bathroom with bread slices in it. And you look in the tub and there was another pot in there with like cornflakes or frosted flakes that had been poured out into the pot that's now sitting in the bottom of the bathtub. I mean, just really bizarre behavior. And I really encouraged him. I was like, you need to go see a psychiatrist. I think maybe this is something going on. And just things started to progress and get really bad. And he would be gone for days and we wouldn't know where he went. And he'd call and say, I'll be home in an hour. Don't show up at all, or come back, 8 hours later. He was very isolating. He didn't come to family events. At one point when it got bad, just normal things I think he was doing before it started to drop off. And then we moved to Florida, and I was like, okay, this is going to be a fresh start. I thought part of it was, I have a large family and we're very, very close. So I thought, getting away, being on our own without the voices of other people and getting a fresh start would be great. So we moved to Florida, and I think at that point it even got worse.
Yeah, I had moved before you guys. We let the kids finish school that semester, right? So I had moved prior to you guys coming down, and I was clean for about like 2 months, and then I ran into somebody on Facebook who was from Las Vegas that I knew, and then that whole cycle started again. And so it started before you guys came down here. And then when you guys got down here, you guys settled down and everything, we settled down. And that's when it really picked up. That's when I believe, to me, that's when the disease was at its all-time high, when we came down to Florida.
Right. And the thing, it was hard because I didn't have my family there. I was literally doing everything on my own. He would make promises and not keep them, say he would be there, wouldn't be there. We'd get into horrible fights over the littlest of things. But it was irrational. Things that seemed rational to me were not rational to him. And I would just go off, and, our fights got very, very bad. And, I questioned, is this a life? But at the time, I still don't know anything. I'm not. There was the one time that I remember your drug use, coming onto my radar was we were still living in New York.
At the apartment, right? Yeah.
And my daughter went to use the bathroom, and he must have been on some type of binge and left a bag of Coke on the bathroom sink. And she brought it out to me. She was about 10. And she brought it out to me, and she's like, I don't even remember what she said. Something like, "Look what Dad left on the counter." And I took one look at it, and I assumed what it was, but again, not really understanding what it really was. But I just assumed that it was drugs. So I quickly grabbed it out of her hand, put it in my pocket. Right at that time, I had to take them to school. Marco was not able to even take them to school. I was taking them to school every morning because he was up all night and sleeping during the day. And I remember driving them to school, trying to pretend everything was normal. And I drove to the corner that had a public garbage can. And I remember throwing it in there. And I was so nervous, driving them to school, knowing that I had that thing in my pocket. But that's the first time I feel like I ever got, that even came onto my radar. And of course, I confronted him, and, it was every excuse in the book. It was, someone at a restaurant gave it to me, and it's just a one-time thing, and I don't actually use it. It was just, I don't know why I took it out, but I came home from the restaurant late, and it was in my hand, and I left it on the counter. And it seemed a good enough excuse to me because I didn't know he was doing that. So it didn't really, I didn't really see it. And then again, fast forward to Florida, we're living there. I still have no idea. And his behavior became even more erratic. I mean.
So this is when we're in Jupiter, right? This is when we're in Jupiter. And, I had mentioned that I was driving from Jupiter to Miami daily when I was the corporate executive chef of that catering company. And I think that was the bottom. That, I'm so bad with time and I don't remember how long I was with that company, but that's at least an hour and 45-minute drive each way.
Yeah, at least, sometimes 3.
And you're working 12, 14 hours.
Right.
So, we never saw each other.
No.
Never saw each other. You were taking care of the kids in Jupiter. I was working. And this is at the point in time where I'm getting drugs shipped to work and home.
And he's intercepting, which obviously I later found out, he was intercepting the mail. He would time it because we knew the time the mailman gets to our mailbox, and he would get the mail before I did. But he was having synthetic drugs shipped to our house, with our children there. That's how bad it got. And just the behavior got so erratic, and everything he promised, you couldn't trust him. I'll be home in 3 hours. Okay. He didn't come home. I think he meant 3 days because.
Well, that's when you used to tell the story about when you would track me on the phone. About Fort Lauderdale, I think bowling or something like that.
Yeah. So I started tracking him because I'm like, I don't know where are you that you'll be home in 3 hours and then don't come home at all. So I started.
So I took the money. I took money from you, right? That's the story where I took money from you, and then.
Yeah, I had a bunch of cash in my wallet, and you said you were going to take your friend bowling. And I went to look in my wallet for unrelated to that, and all the cash was gone. And I remember confronting you, and I'm like, what the hell? Like, did you take the cash? And you're like, no, I didn't take it. And then, of course, at that point, I lost it because it's just you and me there. Of course, it was you. So I start digging through your shorts. I find the money, and you didn't say anything. You wouldn't deny it, but you wouldn't say you took it either. And so, that's what I'm talking about, the irrational behavior. It's like, and what I kept trying to tell you was, if you took it, just say you did, or come to me and say, hey, you have some cash in your wallet, I'm going to take it. Like, that seemed like a rational thing to me. And it's like, when I confronted you with that, it was like, what the hell are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what the money is. I didn't take it. So it was a lot of that, like dealing with a lot of just irrational, none of it makes sense. So that's basically how we lived for a long time. And what happened after that?
So this is at least 13 years of this, right?
Yeah.
This is 13 years of you not knowing that I'm using cocaine and speed. You, at a point, you were tracking me on my phone. I said I was in Fort Lauderdale. I was actually buying stuff in Miami. You knew I was in Miami. At the end, this is when, this is when basically I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't do the commute anymore. I was basically done. I never was arrested. I never overdosed. You didn't know about any of that. And then this is when I came home and I slept.
Yeah, you slept for 8 days straight. Got up to go to the bathroom and eat something and then right back to sleep. And it was our daughter that came and said, I think something's wrong with Dad. Like, what is up with him? He's literally been sleeping for 4 days. So I thought about it and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go in there and ask him because I don't know what else to do or say. So I remember walking in, just tapping him on his shoulder. And I said, look, you've been sleeping for 4 days now. What is the problem? Like, you have to just say it. Tell me. And I remember he just looked at me and said, cocaine. And I was like, cocaine what? Still not even thinking anything. And he says, I've been using cocaine for the past 6 years, every single day. That literally felt like an asteroid came out of the sky and like hit me, because I just could not wrap my head around that. And even more, I couldn't wrap my head around that I didn't notice or I didn't know or I never caught anything, or except for that one time. But it was so astonishing. I was like, what are you talking about? And it took a lot of years. Like, I'm talking, I would say 2 years to really get comfortable to where it settled in that you actually did use those drugs.
For you to believe.
Yeah, it just
took you
didn't.
2 years.
it did not feel real. It felt like you were just like telling me a story, and I could not like sit with that. It was very difficult to know that that was my life, but I had no clue that it was. And, you know, that's how good you were at hiding and manipulating. And, you know, it was just interesting how, you know, it's almost like you're living a double life, but I have no clue, but I'm the closest person to you. So that's even more interesting to me, that, you know, maybe someone from the outside or somebody that knows you not so well would be able to say that, like they didn't know. But for me to say that it took me a long time, like 2 years, to really be comfortable with the fact that that was real and that was what was happening.
At that point, when I told you prior, you know, me to going into rehab, what made you think, you know, what made you think that I'm not going to leave, or I'm going to stay, or how did you come up with that decision that you weren't just going to get the kids, pack up, and go back to New York? Because I think, wasn't it that like your friends and you know, your family and your friends, you let everybody know, and they're like, all right, get out of there.
I mean, if I had $1 for everybody, every time somebody told me to leave, I'd be like a zillionaire by now. But I don't know. I don't really know. Like, maybe it was like an energy, or it didn't really come from a practical place. Like, practically speaking, like, you know, I'm pretty educated. I'm not like, you know, I know what's around me. I'm aware of decisions that I make. I might have been naive to the drug use, but, you know, I know right from wrong. I know what's not good and what's good. But I just never felt in danger necessarily. And I just felt like that wasn't you.
Yeah, you had said that to me before. I remember distinctly you said that you had told somebody that, well, this isn't really him. I believe that's what you told me that you told them.
Yeah.
You said that, look, you know, obviously everything that he's done, in terms of all the actions from being an active addiction, all the things that I did towards, you know, you and the children, the neglect and everything that I did, you had told them that, you know, there's something else. There's something that is making him do this. This isn't really him. So at that point, like, you had like this awareness, I think, that, you know, I had a problem with something. Something was fueling me. It wasn't really me. Yeah, I was taking the drugs, but something was fueling me to act like this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, like, as a spouse, no one knows you more intimately than a spouse. So to me, it just was throwing me off. I'm like, this is not the person I met. This is not the person I know you could be. I just didn't. I don't know if it's like I didn't want to believe it, or it's just like I just didn't believe it. I didn't believe like this was it. More for you. And I think, I don't know why, but I was able to not take it personally. Like, that, I think, is huge. Because I could have sat there and said, you know, well, there was some of that, of course, you know, this is being done to me. You know, he's out to get me. Of course, there was a little bit of that. But on a deeper level, I think I was able to see that it really wasn't about me. And I knew that. I don't know how, but I did. And I think that was really like the key, to really know that it's like not personal. And this has more to do about you than it has to do about me. And you're just going to have to find a way to sort yourself out. I mean, that's the way that I saw it.
Okay, so going back to, I told you that, I was addicted to cocaine. You left the room. Kind of talk about, from me telling you that I was addicted to cocaine, through me going to rehab. Like, what was that process and experience for you being, now you're basically you're really a single mother now, because I'm not even there. I wasn't there. I was there physically part of the time, but emotionally and mentally I wasn't there. Tell me about, like, when I told you that, what was the process of you helping me to get into rehab, and what was that month like? Like, what did you go through? Like, I really, and we talk about this, but for people that are listening and watching, I really want to understand your perspective of that side of, like, what were you feeling?
Well, I think you just kick into survival mode. That's really what I feel like it was like. There wasn't a lot of thinking necessarily. Not that I can recall. It was just like, how are we going to survive? Like, that's it. So from the point that you acknowledged that you were using drugs and, you basically said, I'm done. Like, I can't live like this anymore. And that's when I was like, okay, well, rehab, that's the only thing I know to do. So I started researching and finally got you into one. But of course, it's like a learning process for me too, because I didn't realize the minute you call that rehab, they want you in there if that day, if possible. And I remember that was very stressful because basically, like you said, I'm a single mother. I have 2 small kids. I'm like trying to deal with them and keeping things as normal as possible for their sake, really. And dealing with this, and how am I going to go this month? Basically, I just learned everything. So within 2 days, my life was truly a single mother. It's like as if you died almost, in a way. So I think it was just really survival mode, just one foot in front of the other. Like, how am I going to get the kids to school this morning? And how am I going to, like, put food on the table? And how am I going to, at the time you were the breadwinner. You were the one with the job. And that was something we mutually agreed to, that you would be the one to work and I would take care of the kids until they got to a certain age. And then, I'm really career focused as well. So I was eager to get back in a kitchen as well. But that's what we discussed. You would work and I would stay home until, be with the kids as much as possible until they're a little bit older. And then it didn't turn out like that. So it was like, how am I going to now support the family? And you're not there. And I have 2 small kids. And, thankfully I had an army that was willing to fly to me. I had friends that were sending gift cards to supermarkets at the beginning. And it was, but then emotionally also, it's like your world is turned upside down literally in an instant. For me, that was the case because I didn't know. And so I went from, things weren't great, but at least it was a semblance of a family. And then when that didn't work out, it was like, oh shit, what am I going to do?
And then there's the unknown of, like, me being in rehab.
I'm like, are you going to stay there? And are you going to, run the course? Are you going to relapse the day you come out? There was like all of that stress. I was doing job interviews in that month, trying to emotionally collect myself and make, the kids' lives normal. And then I'm also writing up a resume, which I haven't done in years. But it was like what I felt I needed to do, and it had to happen fast.
What about these 2 times when, I don't know how I finagled it, but remember I got you guys to come in and visit me at the rehab?
Oh my God.
First of all, there's that. And the second thing is that they let me out. Remember they let me out for 4 or 5 hours, and I got to come home. But you picked me up. We went back to Jupiter. You cooked this amazing dinner. And I told you the story about how I had bags of Coke hidden in the closet.
Under your shoe sole.
Yeah, under my shoe sole. And I remember right when we got to the apartment, I told you I had to use the bathroom. I went in there and got it, and I flushed that stuff down the toilet. And we had an amazing dinner. We had an amazing time. And then I was late going back to rehab on my curfew, and they were cool with it. But that was something where, the kids were part of this as well. You didn't hide anything from the kids. I mean, the kids came to rehab. You know what I'm saying? You came to rehab. And I remember too, I don't know if you remember this when you dropped me off at rehab. I told a story about how you grabbed my hand, and I thought it was going to be this moment where you're like, good luck, I love you. You got this. You're going to do it. And I remember you looked at me and you said, look, this is your last fucking chance.
Yep.
You said, you relapse, you're going to lose me and the children forever.
Yeah, and at the time, I didn't think I was telling you what to do. I was just for me.
So then you drove off.
Yeah, I was like, peace.
And I go in and I'm like, I always remember that because that was total motivation. Because just a side note, for myself, I hear in meetings that the percentage of spouses and children that leave recovering addicts is unreal.
Mm-hmm. I believe.
I mean,
it.
you went against the grain.
Definitely.
Definitely went against the grain. I mean, you should have left, taken the kids. I mean, you didn't even have to get me into rehab. You know what I'm saying? You really helped and assisted me in that.
Yeah, and I think, I had to learn really quickly that I can't hide anything. I felt like that almost made it worse. At the beginning, I was trying to do that, to sort of spare the kids to the things that they saw. But then I started to think about it. I'm like, making excuses for this behavior is probably going to make this worse. And I found that the kids responded better when I was open with them about it. And it almost felt like they were in it too. And not just I was telling them something and, it was they wouldn't trust me or they would think I'm trying to cover something up. Kids are so smart. And I felt that was the key to everybody having a healthy recovery in a way, the kids included, because I never hid anything. And even to this day, now that you're on the other side of it, we don't hide anything even now. I mean, the kids can, they tell stories about the things that they saw. And we encourage them to do that. I think that is huge. I mean, I get why parents like to cover it up. I mean, obviously, you want to spare your kids the pain, but at the end of the day, it's their life. And it's not going to change because I sugarcoat it. You know, the reality is the reality. And no matter how ugly that is, it's what they've lived. I can't even try to excuse that away. How do I tell a kid you didn't see that? You can't. So to me, that's huge. Like you have to just, or that's what I thought worked for me, was be open. They see it. They hear it. They know more than you think they do. And having them feel a part of it and not some added distraction or, I think makes them feel safe and that they want to participate and share what they're feeling. They used to share what they felt all the time. And I always thought that was quite interesting because I didn't grow up in a family like that. And for them to share, even when you were in rehab, sharing what they saw, what they felt, what they're doing, how they're coping with it. I think that really helped that even helped myself. I mean, I didn't grow up like that. So for me to really sit in the truth of what was happening and stop pretending and making excuses, I think that was a key to recovery.
If somebody's listening to this or watching this and they're on your side, and they're definitely going through what we just, what we just spoke about, what you just, spoke about in detail, from being in active addiction to, to going into rehab, what advice would you give somebody in terms of what you learned, how to handle and how to navigate through this process?
I mean, I think the biggest thing for me was to learn that you have to embrace and acknowledge the part you play. I think that is huge. For me specifically, I was an enabler in a lot of ways. I excused a lot of behavior away. I always tell this story of, after I found out that you were using, before you went to rehab, we had this huge fight. And, you were just so angry. And I remember you took the garbage can and you threw it and all the garbage went everywhere in the apartment. There was eggs in the garbage and the eggs went all over the wall and the garbage was all scattered over the floor. And I remember saying to myself, every time this kind of stuff happens, I would clean it up. So when you'd go away for a couple days or however long you left for, you'd come home and everything would be cleaned up. And I remember saying to myself, if I don't do something differently, this is never going to change. I'm going to leave it. And I left the garbage there. I explained to the kids what I was doing. I said, please don't touch anything. He's going to have to come back and look at this and face this because he's the one that threw everything all over the floor. So sure enough, 2 days later, you came back, walked in, and it was almost like something just hit you, your face. I remember your face, and you just started kneeling down and picking everything up. And I always think about that because I'm like, how much of my behavior contributed to you feeling as if everything was fine and I'll just tolerate it, and I'll just go about my day, even though, I threw garbage all over the floor and, had all this rage and broke stuff in the house, and you'd come back and it'll be all cleaned up and spiffy and beautiful again. And, I had to make a decision for myself that I can only change me. So you need to be accountable for the things that you've done. And I think that really has helped me in my recovery process, being on this side, is just that very thing, is becoming aware of the part that I played and shifting that and, shifting into something different, because that clearly wasn't working.
Right.
But I think that when you have the awareness of that, it basically changes everything, because, if you can't, I always say this, if you can't look in a mirror, where do you look? You know what I mean? Like, you're the only person with yourself for the rest of your life. If you can't get that together, how can you even attempt to tell somebody anything else? That's probably the biggest lesson that I've learned. And I did go to Naranon for a little while. I've been in aggressive therapy with an addiction therapist for almost 9 years. So I've done a lot of work on myself, and that's probably the biggest thing. You have to really take a look at the part you play and make a change.
That was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate you coming in and telling your side of the story. Like I said, this is the first episode of a 2-part episode. If you like the content, if you watch the video, please like it, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you have any questions regarding anything about the mission of the podcast, or if you know of anybody that needs help, you can email me at bamnrealrecoverytalk@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to help you out in any ways. So thanks again for tuning in. Take care.